Dean Mercer's voice cut through the laughter at the neighborhood barbecue as a pair of boxing gloves landed at my feet. He smirked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Or should I make an example out of you in front of your daughter?" A few feet. Behind him, his father, Victor, folded his arms with a satisfied grin, clearly expecting the crowd to enjoy the show. The cheerful atmosphere disappeared in an instant. Neighbors who had been chatting around folding tables fell silent. Children stopped playing. Conversations faded into uneasy whispers. Then I looked toward the sprinkler near the edge of the yard. My 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, stood frozen. Her face had gone pale. She wasn't crying. She was simply terrified. That was the moment I realized this had never been about me. Dean wanted to scare her. He believed I was nothing more than an ordinary government employee, a quiet woman who spent her days behind a desk filling out paperwork. My sister, Rachel, believed the same thing. So did everyone else in the neighborhood. None of them knew the truth. For more than 11 years, I had served in Army Special Operations, leading security teams through some of the most dangerous assignments imaginable. Had learned how to stay calm when lives depended on every decision. I had trained to protect others under impossible pressure. But when my husband passed away, I made a promise to myself. I would leave that life behind, not because I was ashamed of it, because my daughter deserved something I had almost forgotten existed. Peace. So I packed away my medals, locked every reminder of that chapter inside old storage boxes. I bought a modest home in a quiet, Virginia neighborhood, planted lilac bushes along the fence, took a civilian position with the Department of Defense. Whenever someone asked about my job, I smiled politely and said I processed government paperwork. It was easier that way. The less people knew, the safer our lives remained. For a while, it worked, until the mansion next door was sold. The moving trucks arrived before sunrise. Luxury cars filled the driveway. Workers unloaded expensive furniture for hours. By sunset, the entire neighborhood knew someone wealthy had moved in. His name was Victor Mercer, a powerful logistics businessman with a reputation for getting whatever he wanted. Money wasn't just something he owned, it was the language he spoke, anyone without. Wealth, status, or influence simply didn't matter to him. Soon after came his son, Dean Mercer, tall, powerfully built, always dressed like he had just walked out of a fitness magazine. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Within days, the neighborhood changed. Delivery drivers were yelled at for arriving late. Children avoided riding their bikes past his house. Even simple conversations somehow turned into arguments whenever Dean was involved. Then he installed a heavy punching bag against the fence separating our properties. Every punch echoed straight into my kitchen. Every evening, the walls shook while Sophie tried to finish her homework. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Rachel visited a few weeks. Later, instead of asking how we were doing, she walked through my home studying every corner. Her eyes lingered on the secondhand furniture, the old curtains, the worn kitchen table. Then she smiled. "You know, you could have a place like ours if you aimed higher." I simply smiled back. There was no point explaining that happiness had never depended on expensive things. She wouldn't have understood. The first real confrontation came on a warm afternoon in July. Sophie was outside washing my SUV while soft music played through the open windows. She looked happier than she had in weeks. Then Dean walked across the lawn without saying a word. He reached inside the vehicle, grabbed the radio dial, and twisted it until it snapped completely off. The music stopped. This broken knob dropped onto the driveway. Dean looked at my daughter with complete indifference. That music was garbage anyway. Then he walked away. When I came outside, Sophie was standing beside the car. Silent tears rolled down her face as she stared at the broken radio. Something inside me tightened. I walked straight to Dean's property. Our eyes met across the fence. My voice stayed calm. "Don't ever touch my daughter," I paused. "Or my property." Dean stepped closer until only inches separated us. A smug smile spread across his face. "What are you going to do?" He laughed. "File another government report?" He honestly believed I was helpless. I gave him one opportunity to walk away. Just one. Instead, he laughed even harder. And at that moment, I realized he had no idea who he had just challenged. After that afternoon, I hoped Dean would understand the warning. I wasn't looking for conflict. I had spent enough years living in places where danger was unavoidable. Home was supposed to be different, but some people mistake patience for weakness. Dean, was one of them. As the weeks passed, his behavior only became more aggressive. He blasted music late into the evening, parked across our driveway whenever guests visited, and made sure every encounter carried the same arrogant smile, as if he enjoyed testing how far he could push people. I ignored him, not because I was afraid, because Sophie was watching. Every decision I made taught her something about strength, and I wanted her to learn that real strength wasn't measured by anger. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Sophie had invited a few classmates over to study before school started again. The girls spread their notebooks beneath the shade of the lilac bushes I had planted years earlier. Those flowers weren't just decoration. My husband and I had planted them together during our first spring in Virginia. Every season they reminded me that even after loss, life could bloom again. While the girls laughed quietly over their homework, Dean wandered into his father's backyard carrying a drink. He glanced toward the fence, then, without saying a word, he walked over to the lilacs, his boot slammed into the first branch. Flowers scattered across the grass. Then another kick. Another branch snapped. The girls fell silent. Sophie stood up immediately. "Dad planted those with Mom," she said softly. Dean only smirked. He kicked another branch even harder. I walked outside before Sophie could say another word. "That's enough." My voice was calm, firm. "Step away from the fence." Dean turned toward me with that same mocking grin. "Oh, you finally decided to come outside?" He took another step toward the bushes as if daring me to stop him. I said, "Step away." Instead of listening, he walked straight toward me. His chest almost touched mine. Then he grabbed the front of my shirt. Around us, conversations stopped. Neighbors turned to watch. Rachel stood beside Victor, arms folded, wearing the same expression she'd worn my entire life. Disappointment. Not in Dean, in me. As though I was somehow responsible for his behavior. For a brief moment, time seemed to slow. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. Years of military training simply took over. Dean tightened his grip. Before he even realized what was happening, I gently rotated his wrist, shifted my weight, and redirected his balance. His own momentum carried him forward. One controlled movement. No unnecessary force. No strikes. No injuries. A second later, Dean landed face first in the grass. The entire neighborhood froze. Nobody could believe what they had just witnessed. Dean pushed himself onto his hands, completely stunned. He looked around, confused, trying to understand how someone half his size had put him on the ground without even appearing. To struggle, I stepped back, never raising my voice. "You've had your warning. Leave my family alone." For a moment, I thought it was over. I was wrong. An hour later, someone pounded on my front door so hard the windows rattled. Victor stood outside, Dean beside him, Rachel just behind them. Victor's face burned with anger. "You assaulted my son!" His voice echoed through the neighborhood. "I'll sue you. I'll make sure you lose everything. I'll destroy your career." I looked past him toward Rachel. Memories flashed through my mind. 2 little sisters sharing a bedroom, laughing during thunderstorms, promising we'd always protect each other. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. Rachel didn't defend me. She didn't even ask what happened. Instead, she rolled her eyes. "You've always been jealous." Her words hurt more than Victor's threats ever could. Not because they were true, because they showed me she'd already chosen a side. I quietly closed the front door, locked it, walked back to the kitchen, and sat beside Sophie. She looked up from her math workbook without mentioning the argument outside. We went back to solving fractions together, because some victories don't happen in front of crowds. Sometimes, the greatest victory is refusing to let someone else's hatred enter your home. But I had no idea Victor was already planning something much bigger, and on Labor Day, he would make sure the entire neighborhood became part of it. Labor Day arrived with bright sunshine and the familiar smell of barbecue drifting through the neighborhood. Families gathered in the park with folding chairs, homemade desserts, and children running across the grass. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, but for Victor Mercer, it was the perfect stage. He wanted an audience, and he wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. As Sophie and I walked toward the gathering, I immediately noticed Dean standing in the center of the lawn. With 4 of his friends, they were laughing loudly, wearing boxing gloves, and drawing attention from nearly every neighbor. The moment Dean saw me, his smile widened. Without hesitation, he tossed a pair of gloves onto the grass in front of my feet. "Come on," he shouted. "Let's see what you've got." People stopped eating. Conversations faded. Everyone was watching. Then Dean looked directly at Sophie. "If your mom refuses," he said with a smirk, "maybe she's exactly as weak as everyone thinks." I turned toward my daughter. She wasn't looking at Dean. She was looking at me. There was fear in her eyes, not fear that I would lose, fear that this nightmare would never end. At that moment, I understood something. If I walked away now, Dean wouldn't stop. He would only become bolder. Slowly, I removed my jacket and folded it over a nearby chair. I looked at Dean and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "One rule. If you decide you've had enough, stay down." A few people exchanged nervous glances. Dean laughed so hard he nearly doubled over. "You still think you have a chance?" Before anyone could step between us, he rushed forward. His first punch came fast, but wild. Instead of meeting force with force, I stepped slightly to the side, guiding his momentum past me. Dean stumbled several feet forward, nearly losing his balance. The crowd gasped. His confidence cracked for the first time. Embarrassed, he spun around and charged again, this time throwing a reckless kick. It was exactly what years of overconfidence create: predictable movement. I calmly shifted my position, caught his leg for just a moment, and redirected his balance. Dean's own momentum did the rest. He hit the ground hard, staring up at the sky in complete disbelief. Before he could recover, I controlled the situation without striking him. Within seconds, he was pinned to the ground. No punches, no unnecessary force, just complete control. The lawn became silent. Dean struggled desperately, trying to escape. Every attempt only left him more exhausted. Finally, I leaned down just enough for him to hear. "It's over." He kept fighting. His breathing became heavier. Panic slowly replaced confidence. Then, 3 quick taps against the grass. I immediately stepped back and released him. Dean rolled onto his side, breathing hard as he stared at the crowd that had watched everything. Victor exploded with anger. He stormed toward us, pointing directly at me. "This isn't over." He reached for his phone and immediately called the police. By the time officers arrived, Victor had already created his own version of the story. He claimed I had attacked Dean without warning. He even described me as an unstable military veteran who had lost control, but lies rarely survive when the truth has witnesses. Before I could say a word, our oldest neighbor, Mr. Lawson, stepped forward. "Officer, but that's not what happened." Then another voice spoke up. It was Noah, a 16-year-old who had been recording parts of the barbecue on his phone. "I caught everything." He handed the phone to the officers. The video showed Dean throwing the gloves, Dean making the challenge, Dean attacking first, and me responding only after giving him every chance to stop. When the recording ended, one of the officers looked directly at Victor. "Based on what we've seen, your son appears to have started the confrontation." Another officer explained that Dean, not me, could face legal consequences. Victor's face turned red with frustration. As he pulled Dean away, he shouted one final threat. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I'll ruin your government career." I simply watched them leave, because unlike Victor, I knew exactly what would happen next. 3 days later, my secure government phone rang. The caller was a senior Defense Department official. Before I could even say hello, he started laughing. Apparently, Victor had contacted a high-ranking procurement general, demanding that I be removed from my position. He even threatened to withdraw his company's bid for a multi-million-dollar government contract unless I was punished. There was just one problem. Victor had absolutely no idea who he was talking about. I wasn't a clerk. I wasn't someone filing paperwork. I was the lead security assessor responsible for reviewing sensitive contracts, including his company's application. By attempting to pressure a federal official for personal gain, Victor had created a documented conflict of interest. Within days, his company's bid was officially rejected. That decision triggered something even bigger. Investors pulled their support. Banks began reviewing outstanding loans. Major clients quietly canceled contracts. The business empire Victor had spent decades building didn't collapse overnight, but it started falling apart faster than anyone imagined. Dean's troubles weren't over either. Noah's video spread through local community groups. People finally saw the truth for themselves. Shortly afterward, Dean's gym suspended his membership, citing behavior that violated its code of conduct. The man who loved public attention suddenly wanted nothing to do with it. 2 months later, another moving truck parked outside the mansion. This time, nobody admired expensive furniture. Nobody watched luxury cars arrive. Instead, neighbors quietly stood on their porches as boxes were loaded one after another. Victor no longer barked orders. Dean stayed hidden inside the truck. Rachel carried the last of her belongings without looking once toward my house. The gates closed behind them, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt peaceful again. That evening, Sophie and I sat together beneath the soft kitchen light. Her math workbook lay open between us. She solved another fraction problem before quietly looking up. "Mom, are we safe now?" I smiled, brushed a strand of hair away from her face, and gently kissed her forehead. "Yes, this time, we really are." Outside, the lilac bushes swayed gently in the evening breeze. Some branches would never bloom again, but new ones already had. And as I watched them move with the wind, I realized something important. Real strength isn't about proving you're the toughest person in the room. It's about protecting the people you love, without losing the kindness that makes you who you are. The greatest victory wasn't winning the fight. It was giving my daughter something no medal or title could ever replace: the feeling of finally being safe.